it's a constant thread of the show, something we bring up every week. We really share more in common as libertarians, as folks who are anti-government, anti-war on drugs, pro-marriage equality, anti-government involvement in people's lives. We actually share more with you folks than we do with any of the mainstream political parties.
Very true.
What impact has the war on drugs had in your communities?
In my communities, it is taking people who have families, who may suffer addiction, and put them into prisons instead of hospitals where they should be treated for their addictions. There are children who lose both parents to either, prison or rehab facilities where the treatment that they should be getting is not coming through. And these are children who are left with no incomes, left with, being either put in foster care or being put with relatives who can't afford to take care of them correctly. And I don't think that it should be a crime to have an addiction. This is something that should be taken care of medically and looked at as more of a, how can I say it? It looked at more from the human side of it and humanitarian side of it, that some people can't help that they are on drugs.
The war on drugs is really a war on families. It's a war on people. I mean, people are losing themselves to the prison system, and once you're in the prison system, you're lost. All that's been happening lately is cuts to mental health care. I truly, as Occupy Providence too, I've spoke a lot about this with Occupy Providence, is mental health care is so important because if mental health care leads to supporting people who have drug addictions, and it can stop homelessness, drug addictions. If we are putting money into these things and not taking it out of mental health care, there would be so much more. I mean, I've personally had this, in my family too. And once you get involved in this prison system, which is actually run not by the state anymore, and they're privately owned, once you're in the prison system, you're lost. And, you have, yes, medical marijuana now. I mean, we have that. You also have the right to have under an ounce of marijuana on you. But if you have over that, you have to go to jail. People get lost for years, and then you go on probation, and then once you're on probation, there's all these rules that are so hard to live by. The war on drugs is a failure. It's a failure to the United States.
Has the method of policing encouraged by the war on drugs, what impact do you think has had in creating situations like Ferguson, in creating situations like Staten Island, in creating situations like Cleveland?
Well, because it separates us from the United States of America. It separates us from the police. It makes the police really constantly. All right, I lived in South Providence just recently. I've recently moved, but I lived in South Providence, and all you see there are a lot of drugs, drug addicts, prostitution. The police in South Providence are constantly arresting people, harassing people. I was pulled over 37 times in 1 year for being a white woman, and they just assumed that I must be on drugs if I lived in South Providence. Not that I lived there.
So you were either there to score drugs or
right. I mean, I just lived there. But once they knew I was part of Occupy Providence, I knew my rights, and I would they would ask for my ID, and I knew my rights to ask if am I being detained, officer. I think it's so important that people know their rights when it comes to when the police talk to you, what you should say to them. Right now, the police are filled with fear, and that's, I think, one of the biggest problems. Is the police are fearful of young African American men. They're fearful of African Americans in general, and they go about things that way. The whole country is run by fear, but the police department itself, in many areas, even in Jamestown, where I lived for a long time, the police department, they're now taught to. They're not taught to, shoot someone to stop them. They shoot to kill. They just shot a man 10 times in the head because he had a knife in New York City. Mm-hmm. And it turns out he was a homeless male. a lot of the homeless are getting targeted and victimized by the police department, and they can't even stand up for themselves. So I see it as the war on drugs definitely has a huge part of what's happening right now, which is we're scared of them and they're scared of us.
What type of coalitions have come together in terms of the protests that you've conducted here in Providence over the last few weeks?
Okay, well, I've seen Jobs for Justice out. I've seen DARE, Direct Action for Rights and Equality. They've been very involved with the past few actions, but I've also seen individuals. It's been a lot of, individuals who have put actions together. The first action for Michael Brown was an individual. He wasn't part of any coalition. But the coalitions have been coming together because right now, everybody, as I say, fire in your belly, passion in your heart, everybody's on fire. Like, it's literally like you can't wait to get out on the streets and say what you need to say. Scream what you need to scream. Stop in those streets and try to get the media to pay attention, which they constantly try to ignore. I mean, they ignored Occupy Providence so much, but they can't ignore us now because we've all come together.
And if I may say, not only ignore, but they tend to twist the truth.
Oh, always.
Report unright media. It's unbelievable how the last protest that took place, a local news media gentleman said that we tried to attempt to take the highway again.
Which we did not.
Nobody went out onto the highway but the police. Nobody stopped the highway but the police. So I don't know what he was looking at and what he was filming as, we were marching, but what he reported was wrong.
It sucks because we want the media to pay attention, but the media also will constantly twist the truth.
Well, the same media tries to portray your movement as overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly Ivy League, overwhelmingly upper middle class.
Which they did with Occupy Providence, too. I mean, with the Occupy movement, they tried to say that it was mostly, white privileged children that were there. This past protest was so diverse. I mean, I have to say that since the first Michael Brown protest, that was actually mainly African American when we were there. When me and Melody were there together. Me and Melody probably go to most of these actions together. She's my activist sister for life, is what I call her. But it's absolutely BS.
And then, of course, the obsession over all things highway. I would argue for a moment that the alleged shutdown of I-95 was probably no worse than a bad day at the Providence Place Mall backing up.
Well, or a sports event at Dunkin' Donut Center. And honestly, what I believe, and I truly believe this, is that if your life is, it's that big to you that you can't stop for a half an hour to think about what's going on in this country, then that's pretty sad. They said that, we blocked the hospital entrances, but we actually let an ambulance through. No one was trying to block anybody in that way. It was a short stop. It wasn't like it was very long. And the police were very aggressive. Me and Melody were not there for that because we were with her son earlier. He was with us earlier. So we left before the highway action, but I had lots of friends there. And it was just like all of them. We've been very peaceful. But it's so easy to get us agitated because the police come out and they're agitated. The police come out ready to fight us.
I think what really puzzles me is I've sat on 95 in traffic because of construction for 2 hours at a clip. I've seen in other states where, it's not just a Rhode Island issue about us blocking the highway or blocking traffic. It's been worldwide,
it has been worldwide. Tokyo, France, yesterday, Tokyo came out, France came out.
Where people are complaining and criticizing how we are taking our actions. But what happened when Governor Christie had the George Washington Bridge scandal?
Right.
Where was the outrage and the criticism then? because it was a governor and a politician who decided to block the highway, that was okay. He didn't care whose lives he put in danger. He didn't care who was going to be late for work or who wasn't going to be home on time picking up their kids. He did it for a political reason. We have the right to go and block our streets and stop everything.
And lay down and lay down. We had such a good time at the last protest where we literally stopped twice and we laid down and we felt our heartbeats. And we chanted 11 times, "I can't breathe," for, Eric Garner. Like, it's these actions have been really, really great, but very criticized amongst people and our own friends.
Yes.
We've both been battling on Facebook with people who are so against this highway action, like it's the biggest deal in the world.
And this comes back around to the point about it being only affluent, white, privileged children who are out in the streets causing chaos. There was a local news station where I had gone on to read an article about one of the protests, and everyone was, who was commenting on the highway being shut down was saying, I work. These people are
right. We're all jobless.
Jobless black people who need to get jobs and get out of the highway.
Which is so typical. I mean, how long have we been hearing that? I mean, I've been hearing that ever since Occupy, that we all need to get a job. I mean, honestly, go home and take a shower and get a job. These protests have been people who have careers who have been stopping their lives so that they can speak out. And the diversity amongst our crowds in the past 2 weeks has been amazing. You see people of every race. It is not at all just a white.
And not only race, gender, sexual orientation, age. It's been diverse
and beautiful and actually very, it's been constantly like reunions of seeing friends. And I took an awesome picture of where we were all in the circle and people were coming up to each other and just hugging each other. It's been not just peaceful but loving and caring and just trying to figure out what else we can do because they're not stopping, so why should we?
I look at it as we're a nation in mourning. We're mourning the loss of these individuals by police brutality, and if it means stopping in the street for 10 minutes, we have that right.
When you look, what's astonishing to me is when you look at the sacrifices individuals have made in other nations across the world in responding and essentially supporting political protests,
right?
Whether it's anywhere from the Gaza to Eastern Europe, the level of inconvenience that's being asked of the average Rhode Islander just seems to be so inconsequential.
It's pathetic, really. I'm sorry, it's pathetic.
And yet, a lot of the same element screams about the level of political corruption in this state, and yet they do nothing.
Right.
I ask the question rhetorically all the time: what's it going to take to get people pissed off?
What is it going to take to get people to get out in the streets and to actually do something? And you know what it is it's eventually going to, it's going to trickle up. It's hit the poor communities. It's a class war right now where it's in the poor communities. And then it's going to trickle up eventually. And it already is to the middle class where they are losing their jobs and they're losing their homes. I mean, so many people are losing their homes and then they're getting into the struggle and they're realizing that there's a problem. It seems to me, and I constantly ask the same question, what is it going to take for people to wake up? People have been waking up with this police brutality thing, which is horrifying. I can't wait until people wake up in general and realize that the government is just completely corrupt at this point in time. There's things that we need to be aware of. The Trans-Pacific Partnership that Obama wants to sign into law, which will actually cause, in my opinion, a New World Order. There's also, he signed an NDAA, which could make me a terrorist. There's so many things. And then I actually think that's really funny, but to be on a watch list, my mom congratulated me. But I come from a family of my mom and dad gave me my tent to go to Occupy Providence. They gave me my sleeping bag to go to Occupy Providence. So I'm one of the lucky ones because I was raised awake. But unfortunately, I don't know if this is